I was 9 years old when my parents decided I was no longer a necessary part of their perfect family plan. They kept my twin sister Chloe and handed me over to the state with my belongings stuffed into a single black trash bag. My mother actually told the social worker that I was the difficult one, that my sister had a future, and they needed to focus their finances. For 26 years, they spun a tragic tale to anyone who would listen, claiming I had run away in the middle of the night. They played the grieving parents perfectly. Then they saw me on national television standing on a red carpet as the executive producer of a hit true crime network. Suddenly they wanted their missing baby back. When they ambushed my premiere to play the happy reunited family for the cameras, I smiled and introduced them to the woman who actually raised me. When she walked in wearing her state badge, my mother dropped her glass and gasped, "That is her." My name is Kiara. I am 35 years old, and until that night on the red carpet, I had spent my entire adult life building an empire out of the ashes my biological parents left me in. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to build your own table because your family refused to give you a seat. The flashbulbs were blinding. I stepped off the main stage at the national premiere of my network's newest investigative docuseries. The crowd in the theater lobby was deafening, a sea of entertainment reporters, industry elites, and camera crews calling my name. I had built this true crime network from the ground up, turning it into a powerhouse that demanded respect in a cutthroat industry. I was wearing a tailored emerald suit, feeling every bit the executive producer I had fought so hard to become. I turned to look for my lead researcher Malik, ready to head to the VIP lounge and celebrate a flawless launch. But before Malik could reach me, the heavy velvet ropes lining the press walkway violently shook. A woman shoved past the security detail, her face arranged in an expression of theatrical agony. Tears were streaming down her perfectly contoured face, threatening to ruin her expensive makeup. She wore a silk designer dress that screamed old money respectability, the kind of outfit carefully chosen to look elegant while begging for sympathy. It was Vivienne, the woman who birthed me. She threw her arms open for the flashing cameras, stepping directly into the center of the media circle. "My baby," she wailed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings of the lobby. "My missing baby, you have finally come home to us." She lunged forward, trying to force a hug, weaponizing the live broadcast. She was banking on the social pressure of 100 cameras to force me into playing along with her tearful reunion narrative. I did not flinch. I did not step forward to catch her. I took one deliberate step back, letting her arms grasp empty air. I stared dead into the nearest telephoto lens, making sure every microphone caught my voice. "I did not run away in 1999, Vivienne. You handed me to the state with my clothes in a black trash bag. Security, please remove this fan. She is trespassing." The lobby went dead silent for a fraction of a second before erupting into absolute chaos. The reporters who had been asking about streaming numbers a minute ago were now shouting questions about foster care and abandonment. Vivian staggered back, clutching her chest, as if she had been physically struck, looking around at the cameras with wide, terrified eyes. Before security could grab her arm, Terrence pushed his way through the crowd to stand beside her. My biological father was the picture of polished patriarch authority, wearing a custom charcoal suit and an expression of righteous indignation. He wrapped a protective arm around Vivian and glared at the press pool. "Do not listen to her," Terrence shouted over the noise, his deep voice commanding attention. "She is traumatized. My daughter was abducted when she was 9 years old. We have spent 26 years burning through our savings, hiring private investigators, doing everything we could to find our little girl. She is confused and lashing out because of the trauma." The reporters went wild, scribbling on notepads and shoving microphones closer to Terrence. He was playing the crowd perfectly, leaning into the tragic father role that had garnered them so much sympathy at their country club dinners and church gatherings for 2 decades. I watched him spin the lie with a cold, clinical detachment. I produced true crime documentaries for a living. I dealt with liars, manipulators, and con artists every single day. Terrence was just another amateur trying to control a narrative he had already lost. Malik stepped up beside me, his tablet glowing in his hands. He knew exactly what to do. Without breaking eye contact with Terrence, I reached out and took the tablet. We had prepared for this possibility the moment my face started appearing on national billboards. I tapped a few buttons connecting my tablet directly to the massive digital press board dominating the wall behind us. "If you searched for me, Terrence," I said, my voice slicing through the frantic shouts of the reporters, "why did you stop paying the premiums on my life insurance policy exactly 3 days before you surrendered me to the state?" I pressed a button on the tablet. A massive high-resolution document flashed onto the digital screen behind me. It was a cancellation notice from a major insurance firm clearly showing Terrence's signature and the date. "But it gets better," I continued, taking a step toward him. "Because on that exact same day, you doubled the policy on my twin sister." I swiped the screen and a second document appeared. The crowd of reporters collectively gasped. The rhythmic clicking of camera shutters sounded like a swarm of locusts. I watched Terrence process what was happening. His polished facade shattered. His jaw physically dropped, and the authoritative posture he had maintained for decades crumbled under the flashing lights. He looked at the massive screen behind me, then back at my face, realizing that the daughter he threw away was holding the receipts of his betrayal for the entire world to see. Vivian buried her face in Terrence's shoulder, trying to hide from the cameras, but the damage was done. The reporters were no longer looking at them with sympathy. They were looking at them like bloodhounds who had just caught a fresh scent. Then the crowd parted once more, and the tension in the room thickened into something suffocating. My twin sister Chloe made her entrance, the golden child. She was draped in a six-figure custom silver gown that caught every flash of light in the room. She looked exactly like me, but polished with the kind of unearned luxury that comes from a lifetime of being told you are the only one who matters. She looked me up and down, her eyes dripping with absolute venom, but when she spoke, her voice was coated in sugary distress. "Kiara, how can you do this to our family?" Chloe pleaded, stepping into the camera lights and placing a delicate hand over her slightly rounded stomach. "How can you spread these awful lies in public? Do you not know Julian and I are expecting? You are stressing our parents out and putting my baby at risk." She weaponized her pregnancy with terrifying efficiency, expertly drawing the attention back to herself as the ultimate victim. But she did not come alone. Beside her stood Julian Prescott, her husband. Julian was a wealthy, arrogant, white luxury real estate developer who carried himself like he owned the building, the city, and everyone standing inside it. He stepped forward, positioning his large frame between me and the exit, using his physical size to try and intimidate me. Julian glared down at me, a condescending smirk playing on his lips. "You have had your little moment of drama, Kiara. Now you are coming with us to the green room. We are going to sort this out privately, or my legal team will bury your little indie network by morning with so many defamation lawsuits you will be begging to go back to whatever foster home they pulled you out of." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper, meant only for me. "Do not test me. You have no idea who you are dealing with." I looked at Julian, taking in his expensive tailored suit and his unearned confidence. Then I looked at Chloe, who was still resting her hand on her stomach, playing the martyr for the cameras. I felt a surge of deep, satisfying power. They thought they could bully me back into submission. They thought the 9-year-old girl who used to cry in the basement was still hiding inside me. I turned to the head of my security team, who was standing at the ready. I gave him a curt nod. "Let them into my green room," I said, my voice ringing out clearly. "I want to hear the pitch." The heavy door of the private VIP green room clicked shut, cutting off the chaotic roar of the press pool outside. The room was soundproofed, lined with plush leather sofas and mirrored walls. The moment the lock engaged, the fake tears and public mourning vanished completely. Julian immediately threw his weight around, pacing the length of the room and pointing a finger at my face. "You are out of your mind if you think you can pull a stunt like that and walk away," he barked, his face flushing red. "My real estate firm is finalizing a massive merger next month. Your trashy television stunt out there is tanking my stock as we speak. My investors do not like scandals, and they definitely do not like ghetto family drama bleeding into the business pages." Vivian collapsed onto one of the leather sofas, rubbing her temples. "You are a danger to this household, Kiara. You always were. We had to protect Chloe. You were aggressive. We could not control you. You needed institutional help, and we did the responsible thing." I let out a harsh laugh, walking over to the beverage cart and pouring myself a black coffee. The gaslighting was so practiced, so effortless, that it was almost impressive. Chloe crossed her arms, her silver gown shimmering in the dim light. I cried every night when you ran away, she snapped, dropping the sweet pregnant mother routine entirely. Do you have any idea how hard it was for me? I had to do cotillion and go to Spelman all by myself. I had to carry the entire weight of our parents' expectations because you were too broken to be normal. I was the one who suffered. I slammed my coffee cup onto the glass table. The sharp crack made all three of them jump. You did not go to Spelman alone, Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously low. You went with the educational trust fund that was supposed to be split between us. The same trust fund Vivian drained to buy your silence about where I really went. Chloe stepped back, her eyes darting toward Julian, who looked confused for the first time. And as for my aggression, Vivienne, I continued, turning my gaze to the woman on the sofa. My only aggression was demanding to know why Chloe got private tutors while I was locked in the basement, ironing her private school uniforms. My aggression was asking why I was eating leftovers standing by the sink while the three of you sat at the formal dining table. Do not try to rewrite history in my production studio. Terrence remained silent, standing by the door with his arms crossed, calculating his next move. Julian, however, was not used to being spoken to this way. He marched up to the glass table and pulled a thick manila envelope from inside his suit jacket. He slammed it down in front of me, pulling out a pen and tapping it against the paper. I do not care about your childhood grievances, Julian sneered. Here is how this is going to work. This is a non-disclosure agreement and a brand ambassadorship contract. You are going to sign it. You will become the face of my new philanthropic initiative for quote-unquote troubled youth. We go back out there, we smile for the cameras, and we play the happy reunited family. You tell the press it was a misunderstanding born of childhood trauma. He leaned across the table, his blue eyes cold and calculating. In exchange, you get $1 million payout and a seat at our table. If you refuse, I will leak your sealed juvenile records to the tabloids. I will have my PR team paint you as a pathological liar who spun a false narrative for television ratings. I will destroy your career before midnight. I stared at the contract. $1 million to sell my soul and become their willing puppet. $1 million to validate the lie they had told the world for 26 years. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, keeping my eyes locked on Julian. It was a text message from Malik. My investigative team had been running deep background checks on Julian Prescott and Terrence Wilson for weeks in preparation for this exact moment. I read the text and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. You do not want a reunion, Julian, I said, slipping the phone back into my pocket. You want my network's cash and a PR miracle. Julian's smirk faltered. What are you talking about? I picked up the contract, weighing the thick paper in my hands. Your luxury real estate firm is $15 million in the hole. You have been moving money between shell companies to cover construction delays and missing contractor payments. The SEC issued subpoenas to your chief financial officer last Tuesday. You are bleeding out, Julian, and you need my clean media image and my money to secure that merger before the feds freeze your assets. The color completely drained from Julian's face. He looked like a man who had just stepped off a cliff and was waiting to hit the ground. Terrence shifted uncomfortably by the door, his own financial secrets suddenly feeling very fragile. Chloe looked back and forth between her husband and her father, suddenly realizing she was standing in a room full of sinking ships. I gripped the edges of the contract and tore the thick stack of papers cleanly in half, dropping the shredded pieces onto the glass table. I will not be your mascot, Julian, I said, walking past him toward the door. And I will not be your scapegoat anymore, Vivian. Terrence grabbed the door handle, blocking my exit. You listen to me, you arrogant little. He started, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. I stepped directly into his personal space, forcing him to look me in the eye. I will see you at Sunday dinner, Terrence. I know you still live at the same address. Have the table set. We have a lot more to discuss. I pulled the door open, leaving them standing in the silent room, and walked back out into the blinding flash of the cameras entirely on my own terms. The heavy silence in the lobby shattered the second my words landed. Two security guards in crisp, black suits immediately stepped forward, reaching for Vivian. She recoiled, letting out a theatrical sob that echoed off the vaulted ceilings of the theater lobby. Before the guards could even touch her shoulder, A man violently shoved his way past the velvet ropes and stepped into the blinding glare of the camera flashes. It was Terrence, my biological father. How was the picture of polished patriarchal authority, wearing a custom charcoal suit, a silk tie, and an expression of righteous indignation that he had perfected over decades. He wrapped a heavy protective arm around Vivian, pulling her against his chest as she continued to weep for the cameras. He glared at the press pool, projecting the exact image of a heartbroken protective father defending his family against a cruel world. "Do not listen to her," Terrence shouted, his deep baritone voice easily cutting through the chaotic noise of the crowd. He pointed a commanding finger at the nearest television camera. "My daughter is suffering from severe trauma. She is confused. She is lashing out because her mind cannot process the reality of her past." The reporters, who had been completely stunned just seconds ago, suddenly surged forward. Microphones were thrust over the velvet ropes, and recording devices were shoved into the air. The press smelled a massive scandal, and they were ready to feast. "What trauma are you talking about?" A reporter from a major entertainment network yelled over the din. "I am her father," Terrence declared, his voice thick with manufactured grief. "And she did not run away. My beautiful little girl was abducted from our front yard when she was only 9 years old. We have lived in a waking nightmare ever since. We have spent 26 years burning through our life savings, hiring private investigators, flying across the country, chasing down false leads, doing absolutely everything we could to find our missing baby. We never stopped loving her, and we never gave up hope." The press went into an absolute frenzy. The narrative was too good for them to resist. A powerful true crime network executive secretly, a traumatized abduction survivor, rejecting her heartbroken family on the red carpet of her own premiere. It was ratings gold. They began shouting questions at me, asking if I remembered the kidnapping, asking if my documentary work was a coping mechanism, asking how I could be so cold to the parents who had spent their lives searching for me. Vivian buried her face in Terrence's jacket, her shoulders shaking with dramatic sobs. Terrence held his head high, looking at me with a mixture of pity and stern authority, expecting me to crumble. He expected the 9-year-old girl who used to cry in the basement to cower under his gaze and submit to the social pressure of a live national broadcast. He expected me to break down, accept his false narrative, and let him claim the spotlight he so desperately craved. He fundamentally misunderstood who was standing in front of him. I did not give a tearful monologue. I did not scream or try to defend myself against his ridiculous allegations. I produced investigative documentaries for a living. I spent my days dismantling the lies of con artists, murderers, and corporate criminals. Terrence was just an amateur playing a game I had already mastered. I turned slightly to my left, where Malik, my lead investigative researcher, was standing. Malik had been with me since the beginning of my network, and he knew exactly how my mind worked. He already had his production tablet out, its screen glowing brightly in the dim light of the lobby. Without breaking eye contact with Terrence, I reached out and took the tablet from Malik's hands. The theater lobby was equipped with a massive digital press board directly behind the red carpet, designed to display high-resolution promotional graphics for my new series. I tapped a sequence of buttons on the tablet, routing my device directly to the main display system. The press pool continued to shout questions, but I raised my hand in a sharp, commanding gesture that demanded silence. The sheer authority in my posture made the reporters hesitate, and the noise level dropped significantly. "If you searched for me, Terrence," I said, my voice slicing through the remaining murmurs with cold, clinical precision, "why did you stop paying the premiums on my life insurance policy exactly 3 days before you surrendered me to the state?" I pressed a button on the tablet. The massive digital screen behind me instantly shifted from the sleek logo of my docuseries to a stark, high-resolution scan of a legal document. It was a cancellation notice from a major national insurance firm dated October 12, 1999. The document clearly showed Terrence's signature, terminating a life insurance policy in my exact legal name. The reporters turned their cameras toward the giant screen, their lenses zooming in on the undeniable proof. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as the dates registered in their minds. But it gets better. I continued, taking a slow, deliberate step toward the velvet rope. Because on that exact same day, You doubled the financial policy on my twin sister, Chloe. I swiped my finger across the tablet screen. A second document appeared on the massive display behind me. This one was an aggressive policy upgrade explicitly naming my sister and showing a massive increase in premium payments authorized by the very man standing in front of me claiming he had burned his life savings to find me. You did not drain your accounts hiring private investigators, Terrence, I said, my voice ringing crystal clear across the lobby. You drained your accounts paying for country club memberships, private cotillion lessons and luxury cars while I was sleeping on a plastic mattress in a state facility. You canceled my policy because a ward of the state does not need private life insurance. You legally signed away your parental rights on October 15, 1999. The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. The rhythmic clicking of camera shutters sounded like a swarm of locusts, capturing the exact moment a patriarch's empire of lies was burned to the ground. I watched Terrence process what was happening, his polished, arrogant facade completely shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and suddenly very old. His jaw physically dropped, his mouth opening and closing as his brain scrambled to find a lie big enough to cover the state-certified documents glowing brightly behind me. He looked at the massive screen, then back at my face, realizing that the daughter he threw away like garbage was holding the undeniable receipts of his betrayal for the entire world to see. Vivian stopped her fake sobbing instantly. She pulled her face away from Terrence's jacket, her eyes wide with genuine terror, as the reporters turned their microphones back toward them. The press pool was no longer looking at them with sympathy. The journalists' eyes were sharp, aggressive, and hungry. They recognized that the real story was not a tragic abduction, but a horrific family betrayal orchestrated by two people desperate for media attention. Mr. Wilson, can you explain your signature on these state surrender forms? A reporter shouted, entirely changing his tone from sympathetic to accusatory. Ma'am, did you lie to the authorities about your daughter's disappearance? Another journalist yelled, shoving a microphone directly into Vivian's face. Terrence raised his hands, trying to physically block the camera lenses backing away from the velvet rope. He opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web of excuses, but no words came out. He was completely out of his depth, suffocating under the weight of his own calculated deception. The predators had instantly become the prey, caught in a trap of their own making, and broadcast live to millions. The heavy soundproof door of the VIP green room clicked shut, severing the chaotic roar of the press pool outside. The instant the deadbolt slides into place, the atmosphere in the room drops 10 degrees. There are no cameras here, no reporters to perform for, and no public pressure to maintain the grieving family facade. The fake tears vanish from Vivian's face, as if they were never there. She marches over to the plush leather sofa, dropping her expensive designer handbag and glaring at me with undisguised contempt. Julian immediately takes control of the room, pacing across the carpeted floor like a caged predator. He loosens his silk tie, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and arrogant disbelief. He points a commanding finger directly at my face. You are entirely out of your mind if you think you can pull a stunt like that and just walk away. He barks, his voice echoing off the mirrored walls. My real estate firm is finalizing a massive merger next month. Your trashy television stunt out there is tanking my stock as we speak. My investors do not tolerate scandals, and they definitely do not tolerate this kind of low-class family drama bleeding into the business pages. I do not respond immediately. I take my time walking over to the beverage cart, pouring myself a cup of black coffee. I take a slow sip, letting the silence stretch, letting him exhaust his temper tantrum. I am not the frightened 9-year-old girl they discarded. I am an executive, and I am completely in my element. Vivian scoffs from the sofa, crossing her legs and adjusting her perfectly tailored skirt. You are a danger to this household, Kiara. You always were. We had to protect Chloe. You were aggressive and unpredictable. We simply could not control you anymore. You needed institutional help, and we did the responsible thing. By letting the state handle your issues, we protected our family. The gaslighting is so practiced, so effortless, that it is almost impressive. She speaks with the absolute conviction of a woman who has spent 2 decades repeating a lie until it became her personal truth. Chloe steps forward, stepping out from behind her husband's shadow. She adjusts her 6-figure silver gown, making sure the light catches the diamonds on her wrist. I cried every night when you ran away, she snaps, dropping the sweet pregnant mother routine entirely. Do you have any idea how hard it was for me to grow up with those whispers? I had to do cotillion all by myself. I had to attend Spelman College and carry the entire weight of our parents' expectations because you were too broken to be normal. I was the one who suffered, Kiara. I was the one who had to be perfect because you chose to be a problem. I slam my coffee cup down onto the glass table. The sharp crack makes all three of them jump, their polished composure fracturing for a split second. You did not go to Spelman alone. Chloe, I say, my voice dangerously low and steady. You went with the educational trust fund that our grandmother set up to be split equally between us. The same trust fund Vivian drained to buy you a brand new Mercedes to ensure your silence about where I really went. Chloe steps back, her eyes darting nervously toward Julian, who looks momentarily confused. I turn my gaze directly to the woman sitting on the sofa, refusing to let her look away. And as for my supposed aggression, Vivian, I continue, stepping closer to the glass table. My only aggression was demanding to know why Chloe received private tutors while I was locked in the basement ironing her private school uniforms. My aggression was asking why I was forced to eat leftovers, standing over the kitchen sink, while the three of you sat at the formal dining room table, laughing like I did not exist. Do not attempt to rewrite history in my own production studio. Terence remained silent, standing rigidly by the door with his arms crossed, calculating his next move. Julian, however, is not used to being spoken to this way by anyone, let alone a black woman he considers beneath his social standing. He marches up to the glass table and pulls a thick manila envelope from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. He slams it down right in front of me, pulling out a silver pen and tapping it aggressively against the paper. I do not care about your childhood grievances, Kiara, Julian sneers. Here is exactly how this is going to work. Inside this envelope is an airtight non-disclosure agreement and a brand ambassadorship contract. You are going to sign it right now. You will become the face of my new philanthropic initiative for troubled youth. We will walk back out into that lobby, we will smile for the cameras, and we will play the happy reunited family. You will tell the press that your outburst was a simple misunderstanding born of childhood trauma. He leans across the table, his blue eyes cold and calculating, attempting to physically intimidate me with his proximity. In exchange, you get a $1 million payout and a designated seat at our table. You get to enjoy the wealth and prestige of the Prescott family. If you refuse, I will personally leak your sealed juvenile records to the tabloids. I will have my elite public relations team paint you as a pathological liar who spun a false narrative just to boost television ratings. I will completely destroy your career before midnight. I stare at the contract lying on the glass table. $1 million to sell my soul and become their willing puppet. $1 million to validate the lie they had told the world for 26 years. They genuinely believe that money and threats can bend me to their will. They believe I am still vulnerable. My phone buzzes sharply in my pocket. I pull it out, keeping my eyes locked on Julian's face. It is a text message from Malik. My investigative team had been running deep background checks on Julian Prescott and Terrence Wilson for weeks, preparing for this exact confrontation. I read the glowing text on the screen, and a slow, cold smile spreads across my face. You do not want a family reunion, Julian, I say, slipping the phone back into my pocket. You want my network's cash and a massive public relations miracle. Julian's arrogant smirk falters. What are you talking about? He demands, his voice losing a fraction of its certainty. I pick up the contract, weighing the thick, high-quality paper in my hands. Your luxury real estate firm is $15 million in the hole. You have been illegally moving money between corporate shell companies to cover massive construction delays and missing contractor payments. The Securities and Exchange Commission issued subpoenas to your chief financial officer last Tuesday. You are bleeding out, Julian, and you desperately need my clean media image and my money to secure your upcoming merger before the federal government freezes every asset you own. The color completely drains from Julian's face, leaving him looking sickly and pale. He looks like a man who has just stepped off a cliff and is waiting to hit the ground. Terence shifts uncomfortably by the door, his own financial secrets suddenly feeling very fragile under my scrutiny. Chloe looks back and forth between her husband and her father, her eyes wide with panic as she realizes she is standing in a room full of sinking ships. I grip the edges of the extortion contract and tear the thick stack of papers cleanly in half, dropping the shredded pieces onto the glass table. I will not be your corporate mascot, Julian, I say, walking past him toward the door. And I will not be your convenient scapegoat anymore, Vivian. Terrence grabs the heavy brass door handle, physically blocking my exit. His face is twisted with a suppressed violent rage. You listen to me, you arrogant little... He starts, his voice trembling with fury. I step directly into his personal space, forcing him to look me squarely in the eye. I refuse to shrink. I refuse to look away. I will see you at Sunday dinner, Terrence. I say, my voice echoing with absolute finality. I know you still live at the exact same address. Have the table set. We have a lot more to discuss. I reach past him, grab the brass handle and pull the heavy door open, leaving them standing in the dead silence of the green room. I walk back out into the blinding flash of the press cameras, moving forward entirely on my own terms. The heavy soundproof door of the VIP green room clicked shut instantly, severing the chaotic roar of the press pool outside. The moment the deadbolt slid into place, the atmosphere in the room shifted so violently, you could practically feel the temperature drop. There were no cameras in here, no reporters to perform for, and absolutely no public pressure to maintain the grieving family facade. The fake tears vanished from Vivian's face, as if they had never existed. She marched over to the plush leather sofa, dropping her expensive designer handbag onto the cushions and glaring at me with undisguised contempt. Julian immediately took control of the space, pacing across the carpeted floor like a caged predator. He loosened his silk tie, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and arrogant disbelief. He was a man accustomed to blind obedience fueled by generational wealth and a deeply ingrained sense of superiority. He pointed a commanding finger directly at my face, stepping well into my personal space to leverage his height and physically intimidate me. You are entirely out of your mind if you think you can pull a stunt like that and just walk away, Julian barked, his voice echoing off the mirrored walls of the green room. My real estate firm is finalizing a massive merger next month. Your trashy television stunt out there is tanking my stock as we speak. My investors do not tolerate scandals, and they definitely do not tolerate this kind of low-class family drama bleeding into the business pages. I did not respond immediately. I took my time walking over to the beverage cart in the corner of the room and pouring myself a cup of black coffee. I took a slow sip, letting the silence stretch, letting him exhaust his temper tantrum. I was not the frightened 9-year-old girl they had discarded. I was an executive standing in the heart of my own production studio, and I was completely in my element. Did you hear me? Julian snapped, closing the distance between us. I will not let a local cable hack destroy Prescott Holdings because she holds a childhood grudge. You will march back out there right now. You will tell the press that you were overwhelmed, that you misspoke, and that you are thrilled to be reunited with your family. If you refuse, I will personally see to it that my legal team buries your little indie network by morning. We will file so many defamation lawsuits your legal fees alone will bankrupt you before we even reach a courtroom. He leaned closer, his blue eyes hard and cold. You are playing in the big leagues now, Kiara. You have absolutely no idea who you are dealing with. I looked at his tailored suit, at the expensive watch on his wrist, and then at Chloe, who was standing behind him with a smug, satisfied smile. She clearly believed her husband had just put me in my place. She thought his wealth and status would force me to submit, just like everything else in her life had been handed to her on a silver platter. Vivian scoffed from the sofa, crossing her legs and adjusting her perfectly tailored skirt. She had completely dropped the heartbroken mother routine. The woman sitting on my sofa was the real Vivian, cold, calculating, and entirely obsessed with her social standing. You really are a danger to this household, Kiara, Vivian said, her tone dripping with disdain. You always were. We had to protect Chloe. We had to protect our family from you. I turned my attention from Julian to the woman who had birthed me. Protect your family from a 9-year-old child, I asked, keeping my voice perfectly level. You were aggressive, Vivian insisted, waving her hand dismissively. You were completely unpredictable. You threw tantrums. You broke things. We simply could not control you anymore. You were a violent child, Kiara, and you needed institutional help. We did the responsible thing by letting the state handle your severe psychological issues. The gaslighting was so practiced, so effortless that it was almost impressive. She spoke with the absolute conviction of a woman who had spent 2 decades repeating a lie until it became her personal truth. She had convinced herself that abandoning her own flesh and blood was an act of parental responsibility, a necessary sacrifice to preserve the pristine image of her wealthy suburban household. You never fit in. Vivian continued, her voice taking on a lecturing tone, as if reprimanding a subordinate. Terrence and I worked incredibly hard to build a respectable life. We lived in a gated community. We belonged to the country club. Chloe understood what was expected of her. She was graceful. She was well behaved. But you were constantly acting out, constantly embarrassing us in front of our friends. You refused to adapt to our lifestyle. You were resentful and bitter even then. Terrence remained silent, standing rigidly by the door with his arms crossed, calculating his next move. He let his wife do the dirty work, nodding along in agreement. They were attempting to rewrite history right in front of my face, attempting to convince me that the abuse I suffered was actually a symptom of my own inherent flaws. We gave you every opportunity to be a part of this family, Vivian said, leaning forward and narrowing her eyes. We provided you with a beautiful home, expensive clothes, and the best private schools in the state, and you repaid us by being a violent, disruptive presence. When we surrendered you to the state, we specifically asked them to find you a specialized psychiatric facility. We were trying to get you the professional help you so desperately needed. I stared at her, absorbing the sheer magnitude of her delusion. She actually expected me to believe that shoving a scared child into a trash bag and handing her over to a tired social worker was a medical intervention. She expected me to forget the nights I spent locked in the dark basement, the days I spent wearing Chloe's stained hand-me-downs while she paraded around in custom boutique dresses. They wanted me to scream. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to throw a glass or hurl an insult so they could point at me and say that I really was the aggressive, unstable animal they always claimed I was. They needed me to react emotionally so they could regain control of the room and the narrative. But I was not going to give them that satisfaction. I took another slow sip of my coffee, feeling the hot liquid ground me in the present moment. I let their insults hang in the air, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable for them. I watched Julian shift his weight. Watched Chloe cross her arms defensively, watched Vivian's eyes dart nervously toward her husband. They had fired their best shots and I was still standing perfectly still, entirely unaffected by their toxic illusions. I pause at the threshold, the deafening roar of the press waiting just beyond the heavy oak door. My hand rests on the cold brass handle, but I do not turn it. The silence behind me is too thick, too pregnant, with the decades of lies they still desperately cling to. I push the door shut, and the deadbolt clicks into place once more. I am not quite finished yet. Chloe cannot handle the sudden shift in power. Her entire life has been meticulously constructed around her supreme victimhood, and she refuses to let her reality shatter without a fight. She crosses her arms tightly over her chest, the shimmering silver fabric of her six-figure custom maternity gown catching the harsh fluorescent light of the green room. Her perfectly manicured nails dig into her own skin. You think you can just march in here and destroy everything, she demands, her voice trembling with the sugar-coated rage that she usually reserves for customer service workers. I cried every night when you ran away. Do you have any idea what that was like for me? I had to do cotillion all by myself. I had to go to Spelman all by myself. I had to carry the entire weight of our parents' massive expectations on my shoulders because you could not handle it. I was the one who suffered. I was the one left behind to pick up the pieces of this family. The sheer audacity of her delusion sends a shockwave of cold clarity straight through my veins. I walk away from the door, closing the distance between us until I am standing directly across from her. I pick up the ceramic coffee cup from the beverage cart. I do not throw it. I simply slam it down onto the glass table with a violent ear-splitting crack. The sharp sound shatters the heavy silence of the room. Julian flinches. Terrence takes a sudden step back. You did not go alone, Chloe. I say, my voice dangerously soft, but carrying the weight of an absolute, undeniable truth. You went with the educational trust fund that was supposed to be split equally between us. I step into her personal space, forcing her to look at the exact face she has spent a lifetime pretending to mourn. Our grandmother set up that account for both of us before she died. But you went to Spelman with a full ride because Vivian drained my half to buy your silence. She bought you that brand new luxury car and a summer semester in Paris to ensure you kept your mouth shut about where I really went. Chloe's mouth opens and closes, her eyes darting frantically toward our mother. You knew I continue refusing to let her escape the reality of her own complicity. You watched the state social worker pull up to the driveway. You watched them load my black trash bag into the trunk of that sedan. You never cried for me, Chloe. You celebrated because my absence meant you got 100% of their attention and 100% of the money. You built your entire socialite persona on the tragic story of your missing twin while actively spending the money that was meant for my future. Vivian stands up from the leather sofa, her face a mask of desperate denial. That is not true, she shrieks, pointing a trembling finger at me. Stop lying to your sister. We had to protect this family. You were a danger to this household. You were aggressive, Kiara. We could not control you. You needed institutional help, and we provided it. We did the responsible thing for a deeply troubled child. I turn my gaze to Vivienne. The woman who birthed me is shaking desperately, trying to cling to the narrative that absolves her of her monstrous cruelty. She actually expects the people in this room to believe her revised history. My only aggression, I say, stepping toward her, until she is forced to press her back against the wall, was demanding to know why Chloe received private tutors while I was locked in the basement, ironing her private school uniforms. I let the reality of those words hang in the heavy air of the green room. My aggression was asking why I was eating cold leftovers standing over the kitchen sink while the three of you sat at the formal dining table. My aggression was asking why I had to scrub the grout in the bathrooms until my fingers bled just to earn the right to sleep on a plastic mattress next to the water heater. You did not institutionalize me because I was a danger, Vivian. You threw me away because I finally grew old enough to realize you were treating me like a slave in my own home. You threw me away because I started asking questions you could not answer without admitting what kind of monsters you truly were. Vivian refuses to meet my eyes. She stares fixedly at the expensive carpet beneath her feet, her chest heaving as she tries to draw breath. She knows I hold the absolute truth. She knows my production team possesses the state records, the foster care transfer logs, and the psychological evaluations that proved there was absolutely nothing wrong with my mind. The only sickness was in my environment. Julian looks completely horrified, but not out of sympathy for me. He is a corporate predator realizing he has tied himself to a sinking ship. He married Chloe for her family pristine reputation and perceived generational wealth. Now he realizes the wealth is a mirage built on insurance fraud, and the reputation is about to become the center of a criminal scandal. Is this true? Julian asks, his voice devoid of its former arrogance. He grabs Chloe by the arm, spinning her to face him. Did you know she did not run away? Chloe rips her arm away, tears streaming down her face, but this time they are tears of genuine panic. I was a child, Julian. I was 9 years old. What was I supposed to do? She cries out, effectively confirming every single word I just said. She throws her own parents under the bus without a second thought to save her own marriage. They told me to keep quiet. They told me she was going away to a special school and that I would be punished if I ever talked about the social worker. Terrence finally steps forward, his face dark with fury. He tries to assert his patriarchal dominance, the same dominance that ruled our household with an iron fist for decades. He points a finger at his son-in-law. Keep your voice down, he hisses at Julian before turning his wrath on me. You come into my presence and you try to tear my family apart with these exaggerated grievances. You are nothing but an ungrateful opportunist trying to ruin us. I am the executive producer of the network you just tried to extort. I interrupt him, my voice cracking like a whip. I am the woman holding the financial records of Julian's failing real estate empire, and I am the survivor holding the receipts of your insurance fraud. You do not get to dictate the volume or the tone of this conversation, Terrence. You lost that right the day you stopped paying my life insurance premium and handed me over to the state. The power dynamic in the room has entirely inverted. They walked into this green room believing they could corner me, threaten me, and force me to submit to their public relations fantasy. Instead, they have locked themselves in a soundproof room with the architect of their destruction. I walk back over to the shredded pieces of Julian's non-disclosure agreement scattered across the glass table. I sweep them into my hand and drop them onto the floor right at his expensive leather shoes. You wanted to bring me to the green room to hear your pitch, I say, looking at each of their terrified faces. Well, I have heard it, and I am declining the offer. There will be no philanthropic brand ambassadorship. There will be no tearful reunion on live television. And there will certainly be no more silence from me. I turn my back on them. I do not wait for another empty threat or another pathetic excuse. I grasp the heavy brass handle of the green room door and pull it open. The roar of the press pool outside floods the room instantly, a tidal wave of flashing lights and shouting reporters. I step out of the shadows of my past and directly into the blinding light of my future, leaving them to drown in the wreckage they created. The blinding flash of the press cameras hits me like a physical wave the moment I step out of the VIP green room. The theater lobby is in absolute pandemonium. Security guards are struggling to hold back the velvet ropes as dozens of reporters shout my name, demanding answers about the insurance fraud documents still glowing on the massive digital screen behind the red carpet. I adjust the cuffs of my emerald suit, breathing in the chaotic electric energy of the room. I am entirely in my element. Before I can even take a step toward the exit, the heavy green room door flies open behind me. Julian bursts into the lobby, his face twisted into an ugly mask of pure desperation. He has realized that his private threats mean absolutely nothing, and he is making a frantic, reckless bid to regain control of the public narrative. Do not listen to a word she says, Julian shouts, pointing a trembling finger at my back. His voice echoes over the clamor of the press pool. She is a pathological liar. She has sealed juvenile psychiatric records. She is a deeply disturbed individual who is manufacturing a trashy television stunt to boost ratings for her little indie network. The reporters fall silent for a fraction of a second, their cameras swiveling instantly from me to Julian. He squares his shoulders, trying to project the arrogant authority of a wealthy real estate developer. But the sweat gleaming on his forehead betrays his absolute panic. Chloe stumbles out of the green room right behind him, clutching her stomach and putting on her best terrified victim face for the lenses. My lead researcher, Malik, steps up to my right side. He does not say a word. He simply hands me the production tablet. We had anticipated Julian attempting a character assassination. In the true crime investigative business, you always prepare for the cornered predator to lash out. I turn slowly to face Julian, letting the cameras capture my total lack of fear. I look at his expensive tailored suit, his panicked blue eyes, and the unearned confidence he is desperately trying to cling to. If my network is so insignificant, Julian, I say, my voice projecting clearly into the cluster of microphones waiting at the rope line. Why did you just offer me a $1 million brand ambassadorship behind closed doors to play the happy reunited family? Julian freezes. The reporters gasp, instantly recognizing the scent of fresh blood. I tap the screen of my tablet. The massive digital press board behind us shifts instantly. The insurance fraud documents vanish, replaced by highly sensitive, heavily redacted financial records. Let us talk about why Julian Prescott is really standing here tonight, I announced, stepping toward the cameras. My investigative team discovered that his luxury real estate firm is currently $15 million in debt. He has been illegally transferring escrow funds into offshore shell companies to cover massive construction delays. I swipe the tablet screen again. A formal federal document flashes onto the display behind me in bold black and white. The camera shutters erupt into a deafening roar. The document on the screen behind me is a subpoena from the Securities and Exchange Commission, I explain, my voice ringing with total authority. It was issued to his chief financial officer last Tuesday. Julian did not come here to reunite his wife with her long-lost sister. He came here to extort me. He demanded I sign a non-disclosure agreement and use my network's cash to secure his upcoming corporate merger before the federal government freezes every single asset he owns. The color completely drains from Julian's face. He looks physically sick, staggering backward as if the flashing lights are suddenly burning his skin. The financial and business reporters in the crowd begin shouting questions at him, demanding statements about the SEC investigation and the missing escrow funds. He tries to raise his hands to block the cameras, but he is completely surrounded by the reality of his own financial crimes. Chloe lets out a genuine scream of horror. She looks at the federal subpoena on the screen and then turns to her husband, realizing that the generational wealth she married into is a complete mirage. She is not married to a real estate mogul. She is married to a corporate criminal who is about to lose everything. I turn back to the velvet ropes, looking directly into the primary broadcast camera. My name is Kiara. I say, my voice steady and unyielding. I am the executive producer of this network. I build my career on uncovering the truth and dismantling lies. Tonight, the lies just happen to belong to my biological family. I look over my shoulder at Terrence, Vivienne, Chloe, and Julian. They are huddled together near the green room door, drowning in the flashing lights, utterly destroyed by the truth. I will see you all at Sunday dinner, I tell them, my tone dropping to a chilling promise. Do not be late. The next 4 days are a masterclass in systematic destruction. I sit in my high-rise corner office overlooking the city, watching the dominoes fall exactly as I planned. The premiere of my docuseries breaks every streaming record in the history of the network, but the real entertainment is playing out across the national news channels. By Wednesday morning, the Securities and Exchange Commission officially freezes all assets belonging to Prescott Holdings. Federal agents are photographed carrying boxes of hard drives and financial documents out of Julian's luxury corporate headquarters. His highly anticipated real estate merger collapses instantly. The business tabloids run continuous coverage of his offshore shell companies and the massive embezzlement scandal. Julian is forced to surrender his passport and is currently facing multiple federal fraud charges. Chloe's immediate reaction is pure self-preservation. By Thursday afternoon, her public relations team announces she has filed for an expedited divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and claiming she had absolutely no knowledge of her husband's illegal business practices. The irony is completely lost on her. Her elite brand sponsorships immediately drop her, and the society blogs begin publishing brutal exposes on her fake socialite persona. But the most satisfying legal payoff belongs to Terrence and Vivienne. The insurance documents I projected onto the press board trigger a massive state investigation. The Attorney General officially opens a grand larceny and felony fraud inquiry into Terrence Wilson. Investigators discover that he had continued to collect payouts and tax benefits by illegally manipulating Chloe premium policies, using the funds he initially diverted from my cancellation. The country club revokes their membership immediately. Vivienne is quietly expelled from all 3 of her elite philanthropic charity boards. They are trapped in their massive brick colonial house, surrounded by news vans, unable to show their faces in the affluent society they sacrificed me to climb into. They have lost their wealth, their status, and their untouchable reputation. Sunday evening arrives with a heavy, suffocating gray sky. I pull my black town car up to the wrought iron gates of my childhood home. The massive brick colonial house sits at the end of a perfectly manicured circular driveway. It looks exactly the same as it did 26 years ago. The pristine hedges, the towering oak trees, the expensive imported stone walkway. It is the perfect suburban fortress built entirely on lies. I step out of the car wearing a sharp-tailored black suit. I do not feel fear. I do not feel the familiar anxiety that used to paralyze me when I walked these halls as a child. I feel the absolute cold certainty of a woman who holds all the cards. I walk up the stone steps and push the heavy mahogany front door open without knocking. The silence inside the house is deafening. The grand foyer is dimly lit. I walk past the sweeping staircase where Chloe used to pose for cotillion photos and step into the formal dining room. They are all there. Terrence sits at the head of the long, polished table. He looks broken, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit replaced by a wrinkled button-down shirt. Vivienne sits to his right, staring blankly at the unlit crystal chandelier above them. Her face is gaunt and stripped of her usual heavy makeup. Chloe sits on the opposite side, clutching a glass of water, her eyes red and swollen from days of crying. There is no food on the table. There are no expensive wine glasses or silver platters. There is only the suffocating weight of their impending ruin. I step into the room, pulling out the heavy wooden chair at the opposite end of the table. I sit down, folding my hands neatly in front of me, and look at the three strangers who used to dictate my reality. I told you not to be late, I say, breaking the dead silence of the room. Now let us discuss the terms of your surrender. The drive from the theater to my production headquarters took exactly 22 minutes. I spent every single one of those minutes staring out the tinted window of my town car, letting the adrenaline of the green room confrontation fade into cold, absolute focus. I did not shed a single tear. Crying was a luxury for victims, and I was no longer a victim. I was the executive producer of an investigative empire, and my biological family had just handed me the greatest true crime story of my career. The elevator doors chimed as I stepped onto the secure, restricted floor of my network. It was past midnight, but the bullpen was buzzing with electric energy. My team did not clock out when there was a lead to run down, especially not tonight. The moment I walked through the heavy glass double doors, Malik was waiting. He had already shed his premier tuxedo jacket, his sleeves rolled up and a tablet gripped tightly in his hand. He gave me a single sharp nod. We bypassed the executive suites and went straight into the war room. It was a massive, soundproof, glass-walled conference space, dominated by floor-to-ceiling digital smartboards. This was the room where we mapped out cartel money laundering schemes, where we untangled political corruption scandals, and where we brought powerful predators to their knees. Tonight the target was deeply personal. Tonight the target was the Wilson and Prescott families. Put everything on the glass, I ordered, dropping my clutch onto the long mahogany table. I want every tax return, every property deed, every corporate filing, and every shell company associated with them. They came for my network tonight. I want to know exactly how desperate they truly are. Malik connected his tablet to the main display system. Three junior researchers filed into the room carrying laptops and thick binders of public records we had been quietly compiling since the red carpet ambush was first identified as a potential threat. The digital screens flickered to life, casting a harsh, illuminating blue glow across the room. Let us start with Julian Prescott, Malik said, bringing up a complex web of corporate logos and financial charts. Prescott Holdings is a complete house of cards, Kiara. He has been projecting this flawless image of a luxury real estate mogul to the business press. But the reality behind the curtain is staggering. Look at his flagship project, the Sapphire Towers in downtown Chicago. A high-resolution drone photograph of a half-finished skyscraper filled the primary screen. The concrete pillars looked like exposed ribs against the city skyline. Construction stopped 8 months ago. Malik continued, tapping a red highlighted spreadsheet column. He owes millions to his electrical and plumbing contractors. He has been illegally shifting escrow deposits from new pre-construction projects to pay off the massive debts of his older failing projects. It is a classic Ponzi structure disguised as high-end real estate development. The SEC did not just issue subpoenas last Tuesday, they are actively preparing to freeze his operational accounts. I stared at the numbers, absorbing the sheer magnitude of Julian's arrogant delusion laid bare in red ink. He had stood in my green room in a $5,000 suit, threatening to destroy me while he was bleeding out from a self-inflicted financial wound. He wanted me to sign that brand ambassadorship for his philanthropic initiative, I said, piecing the puzzle together aloud, my eyes scanning the corporate structure. A charity for troubled youth. It was never about public relations. It was a financial vehicle. He wanted to route my network's cash through a tax-exempt foundation and use it as a slush fund to plug the holes in his failing luxury condo projects. He thought he could use my hard-earned money to save himself from a federal prison sentence. Exactly, a junior researcher named Sarah chimed in, pulling up a new set of documents. But the financial rot does not stop with Julian. You told us to look deeply into Terrence Wilson and his logistics company. We ran the freight contracts for Wilson Logistics going back 10 years. The screen shifted to a line graph showing a steep, terrifying decline that plummeted towards zero. Terrence built his entire patriarchal identity on that company. It funded the country club memberships, the private school tuitions, the silver spoons, and the unearned superiority complex. But the graph told a distinctly different story. Wilson Logistics lost their primary shipping contracts 5 years ago. Sarah explained, her fingers flying across her keyboard to bring up the loan records. Terrence absolutely refused to downsize. He refused to lay off his golf buddies in upper management, and he refused to cut back on his exorbitant personal salary. To maintain the illusion of success in his social circles, he started taking out aggressive high-interest corporate loans. When traditional banking institutions cut him off, he went to private alternative lenders. He is leveraged to the absolute hilt. I walked slowly along the length of the glass table, tracing my fingers over the smooth surface. My biological parents. The people who looked at me with such absolute disdain, who claimed I was a danger to their pristine household, were living a complete and utter lie. They were bankrupt. But something was still missing. The final piece of the puzzle did not quite connect. If Terrence is drowning in corporate debt and Julian is facing SEC indictments, how are they still afloat? I asked, turning to Malik. Julian needs $15 million just to close his merger and avoid federal fraud charges. Terrence cannot even cover his own payroll. Where is the buffer money coming from? How did Chloe afford a six-figure custom maternity gown while they are all financially suffocating? Malik's face tightened. The seasoned investigator actually looked hesitant for a split second. He nodded to Sarah, who brought up a new file on the central board. This was the piece that turned a standard financial investigation into a devastating family tragedy. We traced the capital injections into Prescott Holdings. Malik said, his voice unnaturally quiet. Julian received two massive cash infusions over the last 18 months, just in time to stop the contractors from walking off the job entirely. The money did not come from an investment bank, Kiara. It came from a private residential equity line of credit. Sarah tapped her screen. A photograph of a house appeared on the massive digital board. It was a large brick colonial with pristine white columns, a perfectly manicured lawn, and tall oak trees shading the circular driveway. It was the house on Maple Drive, the pristine suburban home I was banished from. The house where I scrubbed floors and ironed Chloe uniforms in the dark basement. Vivian and Terrence remortgaged their home. I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Twice Malik confirmed, bringing up the stamped property deeds. They took out a second mortgage last year and a third one 6 months ago. They liquidated their retirement accounts. They drained the remaining educational trusts. They leveraged every single asset tied to their names and funneled the cash directly into Julian's sinking luxury condo projects. I stared at the pristine image of my childhood home. Vivian had always worshipped status above all else. Terrence had always worshipped authority. They had sacrificed their own daughter 26 years ago just to maintain the illusion of an effortless, perfect family. And now they had remortgaged their pristine suburban home twice just to bail out Julian's sinking luxury condo projects. They had bailed out their golden child's husband because admitting failure, admitting that Chloe married a fraud, was a reality their fragile narcissistic egos could not endure. They are completely broke, Sarah said softly, closing her binder. If Julian's merger fails, they lose the house on Maple Drive. They lose everything. They are drowning in debt, and my network's success is their only lifeline. The entire red carpet stunt suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. They did not see my face on television and suddenly feel a pang of parental guilt. They saw me on a billboard and saw a walking, breathing ATM. They realized the discarded child had built a media empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The tears Vivian cried in the lobby were not for me. They were for her impending bankruptcy. Terrence did not storm the press line to protect his family. He stormed it to protect his final desperate payout. They orchestrated the ambush to trap me in the public eye. They believed they could use social pressure to force me into a reunion, then slowly bleed my network dry to save their house and Julian's freedom. I leaned against the conference table, the cold glass seeping through the fabric of my suit. I looked at the digital screens surrounding me, a glowing monument to their deception, their greed, and their ultimate failure. I did not feel angry anymore. Anger requires passion, and I had none left for these people. I only felt a dark, absolute resolve. Print everything I ordered, breaking the heavy silence of the war room. I want hard copies of the SEC subpoenas, the mortgage deeds, the loan defaults, and the contractor liens. I want them bound in heavy black leather folders. Malik nodded, immediately understanding the assignment. How many copies do you need? 3. I replied, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. One for Terence, one for Vivienne, and one for Julian. I turned my back on the digital screens and walked toward the door of the war room. I had a dinner to attend on Sunday, and I was going to serve them exactly what they had ordered. The ink on my printed dossiers was barely dry when Julian deployed his counteroffensive. He knew he could not fight the financial documents directly, so he attacked the source. He weaponized the only asset his family had left to manipulate public sympathy. He weaponized Chloe. Wednesday morning at exactly 8:15 a.m., Chloe appeared on the highest-rated morning talk show in the country. Malik and I stood in my office watching the live broadcast on the wall monitor. Chloe was dressed in a soft powder blue maternity dress. Her hair was styled in gentle waves, perfectly framing a face that had been completely scrubbed of its usual harsh arrogance. She looked soft, vulnerable, and utterly heartbroken. It was a masterclass in theatrical manipulation. We love her so much. Chloe wept, pressing a delicate white tissue to the corner of her eye. The things she said on that red carpet were terrible, but that was not my sister talking. That was the trauma. She has been gone for 26 years, living God knows where, enduring God knows what. Her mind has created this terrible delusion to protect itself from the pain of her past. The host, a seasoned veteran of morning television, leaned across the pastel sofa and gently patted Chloe's hand. The camera zoomed in tight on Chloe's face, capturing a single perfectly timed tear rolling down her cheek. "My father is a good man," Chloe sobbed, her voice cracking with manufactured grief. "He canceled that insurance policy because looking at it broke his heart every single day. He truly thought his little girl was dead. And now she is back, but she is so filled with bitterness and anger that she is trying to destroy the people who never stopped mourning her. Julian and I are bringing a new life into this world, and all we want is for Kiara to be an aunt. We just want to bring her home and get her the psychiatric help she so desperately needs." She expertly deflected every question about the financial documents, spinning the narrative to make me look like a deeply disturbed woman lashing out at an innocent family. By the time the segment ended, she had the studio audience in tears. Within 2 hours, public opinion began to shift. Julian's elite public relations firm went into overdrive, flooding social media with carefully curated clips of Chloe crying on national television. The hashtags began trending immediately. The public is notoriously fickle, and they love a dramatic redemption story much more than they care about complex financial fraud. By noon, opinion pieces were being published in major digital outlets questioning my mental stability. They painted me as a cold, vindictive corporate executive kicking a pregnant woman while she was begging for reconciliation. At 2 o'clock sharp, my office phone rang. It was an urgent summons from the network board of directors. I gathered my black leather folders and took the private elevator up to the penthouse boardroom. The room was a massive expanse of glass and polished steel, overlooking the city skyline. 5 of the network's top executives and primary investors were already seated around the long mahogany table. The atmosphere was thick with corporate panic. "Sit down," Kiara said. Marcus, the chief operating officer. He did not bother with pleasantries. He pushed a thick legal contract across the polished wood of the conference table. "We have a massive problem on our hands." I did not look at the contract. I remained standing, looking directly at Marcus. "We have a temporary public relations fluctuation fueled by a desperate man facing federal indictment." "We have a full-blown crisis," Marcus snapped back, tapping the table aggressively. "Our advertisers are getting extremely nervous. The true crime audience loves a strong female lead, but they absolutely despise a villain. Right now, your sister is crying on national television playing the pregnant martyr, while you look like a heartless sociopath holding a 26-year-old grudge. The stock for our parent company dipped 3% this morning. This stops right now." A second executive named Richard leaned forward, intertwining his fingers. He looked at me with a condescending, authoritative stare. "Julian Prescott legal team sent over a proposal an hour ago. It is a win for everyone, Kiara. We want you to sign this contract. You are going to shoot a 2-hour live redemption special this weekend." You are going to sit on a couch with your sister, you are going to hug her, and you are going to publicly accept their olive branch. I stared at Richard, letting a slow, terrifying silence fill the boardroom. You want me to validate the people who threw me into the foster system. I want you to save this network's ratings, Richard countered, his voice rising in volume. I want you to act like a professional and protect our bottom line. You play nice, you accept the family reunion, and we brand this entire scandal as a journey of healing and forgiveness. We can sell the exclusive broadcast rights for millions. It is the perfect narrative arc to save the show. It is a lie, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. And I do not produce fairy tales. You have a fiduciary duty to this company. Marcus warned, his face flushing bright red with anger. Julian Prescott is threatening massive defamation lawsuits. He claims you fabricated those insurance documents on the red carpet. If you refuse to do this special, we will suspend you immediately pending a full internal investigation. We cannot have an unstable executive tanking our corporate reputation. I took a slow, deliberate breath. They thought they could bully me just like Julian and Terrence had tried to do. They fundamentally misunderstood the power dynamic in the room. I reached down and picked up the heavy black leather folders I had brought from the war room. I tossed them onto the center of the conference table. They landed with a heavy, solid thud. Julian Prescott is $15 million in debt, I stated plainly, watching the executive's expressions instantly shift from anger to complete shock. The Securities and Exchange Commission issued subpoenas to his real estate firm last Tuesday. My parents have remortgaged their suburban home twice to illegally bail out his sinking luxury condo projects. He is threatening you with defamation lawsuits because he is absolutely terrified. He needs my network cash to save his corporate merger, and he is using his pregnant wife tears to manipulate you into forcing my hand. Marcus stared at the folders, his mouth slightly open. He reached out tentatively, pulling the top dossier toward him. Are you absolutely certain about this financial data, Kiara? I do not make allegations, Marcus. I deal in absolute verifiable proof, I said, leaning forward and placing my hands flat on the table. Julian is bleeding out and he is trying to use this boardroom as a tourniquet. If you force me to shoot a fake reunion special, you are not saving this network. You are legally binding this company to a man who is about to be indicted for federal corporate fraud. You will drag this entire network down with him the moment the feds freeze his assets. The executives looked at each other, the reality of the situation rapidly setting in. The threat of a defamation lawsuit was terrifying, but the threat of being publicly tied to an SEC fraud investigation was catastrophic. They flipped through the documents, their eyes scanning the highlighted bank transfers and the federal subpoenas. The panic in the room shifted entirely away from me and directly onto Julian Prescott. What is your play here, Kiara? Richard asked, his tone entirely stripped of its former command. He closed the folder and looked up at me with newfound respect. My play is exactly what it has always been, I replied, stepping back from the table and smoothing the front of my jacket. I am going to let them dig their own graves. I am going to let them lie on national television. I am going to let Chloe play the victim, and I am going to let Terrence play the grieving father. I am going to let them build their entire defense on a foundation of absolute lies. And then when they are standing at the absolute edge of the cliff, I am going to push them over. I turned and walked toward the heavy glass doors of the boardroom. I paused with my hand on the handle, looking back at the 5 men sitting in stunned silence. You hired me to build the most ruthless investigative network in this industry, I reminded them, my voice echoing perfectly in the large room. Trust my process. I am going to Sunday dinner at their house, and I am going to secure the greatest season finale this network has ever broadcast. The grand ballroom of the Sovereign Hotel is a blinding sea of crystal chandeliers and forced philanthropy. Julian has spared absolutely no expense for his inaugural high society charity gala. Massive velvet banners drape from the gilded balconies displaying the logo for the Prescott Initiative for Troubled Youth. The sheer hypocrisy of the foundation name is almost suffocating. The man who willingly helped discard a 9-year-old girl into the foster system is now standing on a gold-plated stage, leveraging the concept of troubled youth to salvage his crumbling public image. I step through the towering oak doors of the ballroom, wearing a floor-length crimson gown that cuts through the sea of monochrome tuxedos and pastel cocktail dresses like a knife. I was not invited, but security at these events is entirely reliant on face recognition and an air of absolute belonging. I do not ask for permission to enter. I simply walk past the velvet ropes with the unyielding posture of a woman who owns the building. The moment I cross the threshold, the air in the room shifts. Whispers ripple through the crowd of elite socialites and corporate sharks. They recognize me from the media firestorm. They recognize the face of the discarded twin, the woman who single-handedly derailed the Prescott real estate empire on national television just days ago. Chloe spots me from across the room. She is standing near an ice sculpture holding a flute of sparkling water, her custom silver maternity dress shimmering under the spotlights. The panic in her eyes is instantaneous, a flash of pure, unadulterated terror. But Chloe has spent her entire life performing for an audience. Within 3 seconds, she buries the panic under a thick layer of practiced sugary affection. She leaves her group of wealthy wives and marches directly toward me, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She does not yell. She does not call security. She knows that any public altercation will immediately end up on the front page of every tabloid by morning. Instead, she grabs my arm, her manicured fingernails digging into my skin with a vicious warning grip. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here, Kiara," she hisses through a bright camera, ready smile. I look down at her hand and then back up to her face. "I am just here to support the family business, Chloe. I hear Julian is extremely passionate about troubled youth these days." Her jaw tightens, but she does not let go. Her mind races, calculating the most effective way to neutralize my presence. Then I see the exact moment the strategy forms in her eyes. If she cannot throw me out, she is going to use me. She is going to weaponize my presence to validate her own victimhood. "Play along, or I swear to God I will have you arrested for trespassing," she whispers. Before I can respond, she loops her arm tightly through mine, transforming her aggressive grip into a picture-perfect display of sisterly affection. She forces me to walk alongside her, steering me directly toward the VIP section of the ballroom. "Everyone, look who decided to surprise us!" Chloe announces, her voice ringing with synthetic joy as she parades me into a circle of older men in tailored suits. These are not local socialites. I recognize them immediately. They are senior partners from a massive private equity firm in New York. They are the venture capitalists. Julian is cut off from traditional banking because of his federal subpoenas, so he is desperately hunting for private money to keep his luxury condo projects from going into foreclosure. "Gentlemen, I am so incredibly thrilled to introduce you to my sister Kiara," Chloe says, placing a proprietary hand on my shoulder. She turns to the investors with a look of profound, brave sorrow. "As you know, our family has been through an unimaginable ordeal recently. Kiara has struggled with so much trauma and bitterness from her past. But family is everything. We are reclaiming her. We are wrapping her in love and bringing her back into the fold. Her presence here tonight is proof that the Prescott Initiative is not just a charity for us. Healing troubled youth is our personal family mission. It is a masterclass in psychological manipulation." She expertly paints me as the broken, delusional charity case, while elevating herself and Julian to the status of magnanimous saviors. She is using my trauma as a prop to secure funding for her husband's fraudulent real estate empire. The lead investor, a distinguished man with silver hair and a calculating gaze, looks at me with a mixture of pity and corporate interest. "It is a remarkable story," he says, swirling his whiskey. "Julian was just telling us about the expansion of his Sapphire Towers project. He mentioned that family unity and strong moral foundations are the core pillars of his business philosophy. It is good to see those values in action." Chloe beams, her smile radiant and entirely hollow. "Julian is a visionary," she coos. "He builds communities, not just buildings. And with the right capital partners, he is ready to finalize the Sapphire expansion by next quarter." I listen to her spin the lie with flawless execution. Julian is standing just a few feet away, wrapping up a conversation with a local politician. He glances over and sees me standing with the venture capitalists. The color instantly drains from his face. He knows exactly what I do for a living, and he knows I do not make social calls. He starts moving toward us, his eyes wide with silent warning, but he is blocked by a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. I turn to the silver-haired investor. I reach out and smoothly lift a crystal flute of champagne from a passing tray. The cool glass grounds me in the moment. I do not look at Chloe. I keep my eyes locked directly on the men holding the checkbooks. It truly is a remarkable story. I say, my voice perfectly level, carrying clearly over the ambient noise of the ballroom. I raise my champagne glass slightly, letting the crystal catch the light. It is amazing what Julian has done with the Prescott properties, especially considering his CFO flipped on him to the feds last Tuesday. The absolute silence that falls over the circle of investors is deafening. The silver-haired man stops swirling his whiskey. The friendly corporate smiles vanish from the faces of the other partners, replaced instantly by the cold, hard calculation of men who protect their money above all else. I take a slow sip of my champagne, letting the bomb detonate completely. I am sorry, the lead investor says, his voice dropping an octave. Did you just say his chief financial officer is cooperating with federal authorities? Chloe lets out a panicked, breathless laugh. She grips my arm so hard I can feel her nails threatening to draw blood. She is joking. She stammers, her eyes darting frantically between the investors. Kiara has a very dark sense of humor. It is a symptom of her condition. Please ignore her. I look directly at the lead investor, ignoring Chloe's desperate grasping fingers. The Securities and Exchange Commission issued the subpoenas 5 days ago. I state calmly, delivering the financial execution with surgical precision. The Sapphire Towers project is completely insolvent. Julian has been illegally transferring escrow funds to cover his existing debts. If you sign a term sheet with Prescott Holdings tonight, you are not investing in real estate. You are funding a federal crime scene. I suggest you call your legal compliance team before you write that check. The venture capitalists do not ask another question. They do not look at Chloe. They do not wait for Julian to reach the circle. They simply set their drinks down on the nearest table and walk away, their faces grim and their phones already in their hands. Julian's entire financial lifeline evaporates in less than 30 seconds. Chloe releases my arm as if she has been burned. She covers her mouth, staring at the retreating backs of the investors. She cannot even formulate a sentence. The polished facade of the high society gala is completely shattered. Julian finally reaches us. He does not care about the cameras anymore. He does not care about the charity banners or the wealthy guests watching from the perimeter. He grabs my upper arm with a bruising, terrifying force. His face is completely devoid of its usual arrogant smirk. It is purple with unhinged, animalistic rage. Without a single word, he drags me away from the ice sculpture and pulls me violently through a set of heavy mahogany double doors leading into a secluded service corridor. The music and the chatter of the ballroom are instantly muffled as the doors swing shut behind us. The corridor is dimly lit, smelling of industrial cleaning supplies and cold concrete. Julian slams me against the wall, his forearm pressing heavily against my collarbone. He is shaking with a fury so intense he can barely articulate his words. "You think you are so smart, you little street rat?" He hisses, saliva flying from his lips. "You think you can waltz into my event and destroy a $20 million capital injection with one sentence? You have absolutely no idea what you have just done. I will ruin you. I will bury your network in so many defamation lawsuits you will be paying my legal fees until the day you die." I do not flinch. I look him dead in his panicked, bloodshot eyes. "You cannot sue for defamation when the statements are verifiable facts, Julian." Before he can respond, a heavy shadow detaches itself from the far end of the service corridor. The heavy, measured footsteps echo against the concrete floor. Terrence steps out of the dim lighting, his massive frame blocking the only exit. He is not wearing his usual country club attire. He is wearing a dark suit, his face set in stone, his eyes completely dead. He walks directly up to me, shoving Julian aside. Terrence grabs my other arm, his massive hand wrapping around my bicep with a bruising, punishing force that immediately brings back memories of the dark basement. He leans down until his face is inches from mine. He does not yell. His voice is a low, guttural rumble of absolute authority. Private family dinner. Tomorrow night. Our house, he commands, his grip tightening until my fingers go numb. You will sign the rights to your story over to Julian's media shell company, or we destroy everything you have built. The bruise on my bicep from Terrence, gripping my arm, has blossomed into a violent shade of purple by the time I pull my black SUV into the circular driveway of the house on Maple Drive. 24 hours have passed since the charity gala, since the physical ambush in the secluded corridor. I park exactly in the spot where a tired social worker parked her sedan 26 years ago. I remember the cold rain from that day, the feeling of being shoved into the back of a state vehicle while my family watched from the warmth of the porch. Today the house looks immaculate. The towering white columns gleam under the custom exterior lighting, standing as a pristine monument to their completely fabricated prestige. I step out of the car, the cool evening wind whipping my trench coat around my legs. I do not knock when I reach the heavy mahogany front door. I simply push it open and step into the grand foyer. The transition from the cold reality of the driveway to the sickening warmth of the dining room is jarring. The long oak table is lavishly set with heavy crystal goblets and antique sterling silver. Vivian stands near the head of this table, pouring a $200 bottle of Bordeaux into a glass with practiced elegance. She wears a cream cashmere sweater, her face arranged in an expression of pleasant maternal expectation. She acts as if the physical assault by her husband the night before never happened. She acts as if we are a normal, affluent family sitting down for a Sunday roast. "Kiara, darling," she coos, setting the wine bottle down. "You are exactly on time. Please take a seat. I had the chef prepare the duck just the way Terrence likes it." Terrence sits at the head of the table, his posture rigid, his face entirely devoid of the violent rage he displayed in the corridor. Julian sits to his right, wearing a freshly pressed suit, his arrogant smirk firmly back in place. Chloe sits across from him, staring intently at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. The scene is so perfectly staged it makes my skin crawl. They have spent decades performing this exact play for the neighbors, for the country club, for the press. Now they are performing it for me, trying to force me back into the role of the compliant subordinate daughter. I do not sit down. I walk slowly into the room, stopping just behind the empty chair pulled out for me. "I see you brought out the good silver," I say, my voice cutting through the artificial warmth of the room. "It is quite a contrast to the plastic bowls you used to slide down the basement stairs for my dinners. I suppose extortion requires a more refined table setting." Vivian sighs, a delicate fluttering sound meant to convey exhaustion with my supposed dramatics. She gracefully takes her seat, crossing her legs. "We are not here to dwell on your distorted childhood memories, Kiara. We are here to secure the future of this family. Terrence made our position quite clear last night. We are offering you a chance to be part of our legacy instead of a footnote in our history." Terrence folds his large hands on the table, the heavy gold signet ring on his finger, catching the chandelier light. He looks at me with the cold calculation of a man accustomed to buying or bullying his way out of every consequence. "Sit down, Kiara," he commands, his voice a low rumble. I remain standing. His jaw tightens slightly, but he pushes a thick leather-bound portfolio across the polished wood. The contract comes to a stop near my hand. Julian picks up the narrative, leaning forward with renewed confidence. "It is a very simple transition of intellectual property," he explains, tapping the portfolio. "My media shell company will acquire the exclusive rights to your life story, your name, and your likeness. In exchange, we will drop our plans to pursue litigation against your network. We will also ensure that the investors who pulled out of my real estate deal last night are quietly informed that your little outburst was simply a misunderstanding fueled by stress. You sign the paperwork and we let you keep your job. You refuse and we launch a smear campaign so aggressive your board of directors will have you fired and blacklisted by Tuesday morning." They actually believe they have me cornered. They believe the bruise on my arm and the threat to my career will break my spirit. They are relying on the outdated assumption that I am still the terrified 9-year-old girl who desperately wanted their approval. I reach out and open the leather portfolio. The contract is dense, filled with legal jargon designed to completely strip me of my agency. It demands I hand over every piece of investigative journalism I have compiled on their financial crimes. It demands absolute silence. And what about the SEC subpoenas, Julian? I ask, flipping a page without looking up. Does this contract magically erase the federal agents combing through your fraudulent escrow accounts right now? Does it erase the fact that your father-in-law has remortgaged this pristine house twice just to bail out your sinking condo projects? Chloe Head snaps up her eyes wide with shock. She looks directly at Vivian. You remortgaged the house, she asks, her voice trembling. Mom, you told me the business was fine. You told me the investments were secure. Vivian glares at me, her maternal mask slipping just enough to reveal the panic underneath. Be quiet, Chloe, she snaps harshly. We handled the liquidity issues. It is none of your concern. Oh, but it is her concern, I say, dropping the contract back onto the table. Because Julian needs my network's money to plug the holes in his failing empire, and you need Julian's empire to survive, so the bank does not foreclose on this beautiful dining room. The irony is absolutely breathtaking. You threw me away because I did not fit your perfect wealthy image, and now you are begging me to save you from absolute ruin. Terrence stands up, the heavy oak chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. He slams his fist onto the table, rattling the expensive crystal. You will sign that document, he roars, his facade of calm control instantly shattering. You owe this family, Kiara. We brought you into this world. We provided for you. We kept your aggressive, unstable behavior hidden from the public to protect your sister. You owe us your obedience, and you owe us your loyalty. If you walk out of this house without signing your name, I will personally make sure you are destroyed in the press. I will use every connection I have left to bury you. The sheer volume of his voice used to send me hiding in the darkest corners of the house. Now it just sounds like the desperate thrashing of a drowning man. I look at Terrence, absorbing the fullness of his rage. I look at Julian, sweating through his expensive suit. I look at Vivian, refusing to meet her golden child's questioning gaze. And I look at Chloe, realizing for the first time that her entire life has been subsidized by fraud. I slowly reach into the inner pocket of my trench coat. I do not pull out a pen. I pull out a small, sleek, black flash drive and toss it directly onto the center of the contract. It lands with a sharp click. I do not owe you a damn thing, Terrence, I say, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. That drive contains the unedited high-definition security footage from the charity gala last night. It contains clear audio of you physically assaulting me in the corridor and threatening to destroy my business. It also contains the complete unredacted financial trail proving Vivian committed mortgage fraud by inflating the value of this property to secure those desperate loans. Terrence's face drains of color. He stares at the flash drive as if it is a live explosive. You thought you could drag me back into the house of horrors and bully me into submission. I continue stepping back from the table. But I did not come here to negotiate a surrender. I came here to deliver a message. My legal team filed the assault and extortion charges with the district attorney exactly 1 hour ago. The evidence is already in their hands. Julian leaps out of his chair, knocking his wine glass over. The dark red liquid spills across the pristine white tablecloth, looking exactly like fresh blood. You cannot do this, he shouts, panic stripping his voice of all authority. You will go down with us. The scandal will ruin your reputation too. I turn toward the front door, the heavy silence of the dining room replaced by the frantic breathing of my cornered family. I built my reputation on exposing monsters, Julian, I say, looking over my shoulder one last time. Tomorrow morning the world gets to meet mine. I suggest you all find a good criminal defense attorney before the morning news cycle begins. I walk out of the dining room, leaving the $200 wine bleeding into the table, and step out into the cool, clean night air. Terrence points commandingly to a seat at the table, his face a mask of enforced authority. Sit, Kiara, right where you used to. I do not move toward the table. Instead, I reach out with my foot and kick the heavy wooden chair back. The harsh scrape of wood against the polished floor echoes sharply in the cavernous dining room. I never sat at the dining table, Terrence, I say, my voice cutting through the manufactured elegance of the room. I ate in the kitchen after you, Vivian, and Chloe were finished. I ate the cold scraps off the serving platters while standing over the sink. Do not try to rewrite history just because you need my signature on a check today. Vivienne gasps, her hand flying to her throat in a practiced display of maternal shock. That is an absolute lie, she protests, her voice pitched high with righteous indignation. We always set a place for you. You were the one who refused to join us. You were sullen and withdrawn. You isolated yourself because you were determined to punish us for simply loving your sister. I look at her, really look at the woman who spent my entire childhood treating me like an unpaid servant. I preferred the kitchen, Vivian, because it was the only room in this house where I did not have to watch you meticulously divide the food, giving Chloe the finest cuts while tossing the burned edges onto my plate. I preferred the cold tile of the kitchen floor over sitting at this mahogany table and listening to you tell me how much space I was taking up in your perfect life. Terrence slams his hand down on the table, rattling the crystal goblets. Enough of this revisionist nonsense, he barks. We did not bring you here to listen to your petty childhood grievances. We brought you here to conduct business. You are going to listen and you are going to comply. Julian steps forward smoothly, taking control of the room from his father-in-law. He is sweating, but he masks his desperation with a predatory smirk. He reaches into his leather briefcase and pulls out a thick stack of legal documents, slamming them down onto the center of the table. Let us talk about your production company, Kiara. Julian begins, his tone dripping with corporate arrogance. My financial analysts took a very close look at your network valuation. You have built quite an impressive independent empire. Extremely profitable, highly liquid. Exactly the kind of asset injection Prescott Holdings needs to stabilize our current portfolio. I stare at the stack of papers. He is not asking for a truce. He is staging a hostile takeover. The terms are simple. Julian continues, leaning his hands on the table and leaning toward me. You are going to sign over 80% of your production company equity to my Media Shell Corporation. You step down as executive producer and take a figurehead role. We assume complete creative and financial control of your network. In exchange, we play the happy family. We give you the PR miracle of a lifetime. We go on the morning shows, we hold hands, and we tell the world that our family is finally healed. I do not blink. 80% of my company. They are not just trying to cover their $15 million debt. They are trying to consume my entire identity, to swallow my life work, to fund their lavish, fraudulent lifestyle. And if I refuse, I ask, my voice completely devoid of fear. Julian's smile widens into something truly sinister. He pulls a sleek silver tablet from his briefcase and taps the screen, turning it to face me. If you refuse, Julian says softly, we release the documentary. I look at the screen. A high production value title card flashes, The Broken Twin, the Kiara Wilson story. We hired your former assistant, Julian explains, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. The one you fired last year for embezzlement. She was incredibly eager to help us. She provided us with thousands of hours of B-roll outtakes and private office security footage. We hired top-tier editors to chop it up. We brought in paid psychiatric experts to review the heavily doctored footage and diagnose you from afar. He taps the screen again, and a video clip begins to play. It is footage of me pacing in my office, rubbing my temples during a stressful production deadline. But the audio has been manipulated, layered with sinister background music and a voiceover from a doctor claiming I suffer from severe paranoid delusions and violent psychological breaks. It paints a very convincing picture of a deeply disturbed woman who fabricates elaborate conspiracy theories to ruin her family because she cannot handle her own inadequacies, Julian says, shutting the tablet off. We have a distribution deal lined up with a rival streaming service. The moment you walk out of this house without signing that contract, the documentary goes live. Your credibility as an investigative journalist will be instantly destroyed. Your remaining sponsors will pull their funding. You will be painted as clinically insane, and everything you have built will turn to dust. Chloe chimes in, wiping a non-existent tear from her perfectly powdered cheek. It breaks my heart, Kiara. It really does. I begged Julian not to do this. But the world needs to know the truth about your mental state before you hurt anyone else. We are just trying to protect the public from your toxic lies. The sheer magnitude of their extortion is breathtaking. They have weaponized my own stolen footage, fabricated a psychiatric diagnosis, and packaged it as a weapon of mass destruction. They are completely bankrupt, drowning in federal subpoenas and mortgage fraud, yet they are still trying to play the apex predators. They expect me to panic. They expect me to look at the legal documents, look at the doctored video and collapse under the overwhelming weight of their coordinated attack. They expect the little girl who used to hide in the kitchen to finally surrender to the monsters in the dining room. Instead, I reach into my pocket and pull out a sleek gold pen. I take a slow, deliberate step toward the table. Julian's smirk widens. Terrence crosses his arms, looking entirely satisfied with himself. Vivian lets out a long, dramatic sigh of relief, reaching for her wine glass. They think they have won. They think the war is over. I pick up the heavy stack of legal documents. I do not look at the signature line. I look directly into Julian's eyes. You went to a lot of trouble to acquire stolen footage, Julian, I say, my voice perfectly steady. But you made one fatal miscalculation in your corporate espionage. Julian frowns, his smirk faltering slightly. What are you talking about? I fired my assistant for embezzlement, I state, clearly holding his gaze. But I did not prosecute her. I let her walk away with a severance package on one condition. I legally bound her to a double-blind non-disclosure agreement and retained full access to her personal servers. I knew she was shopping my private footage to my competitors. I let her do it. In fact, I encouraged it. The color begins to drain from Julian's face. The footage she gave you is not stolen, Julian. It is watermarked, I say, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Every single frame of that doctored documentary contains a micro-encoded digital tracking signature embedded by my lead technician, Malik. It proves exactly when the footage was altered, exactly who manipulated the audio, and exactly which shell company paid the fraudulent psychiatric experts. Terrence stands up again, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. What is she talking about, Julian? I am talking about wire fraud, federal extortion, and premeditated corporate sabotage, I say, turning to face my father. I am talking about the fact that Julian just handed me the exact digital evidence I need to put him in a federal penitentiary for the next 20 years. I grip the stack of legal documents with both hands. With one swift, violent motion, I rip the 100-page contract perfectly in half. I drop the shredded pieces onto the immaculate dining table right into the center of Vivian's pristine serving platters. Release the documentary, Julian, I challenge him, leaning over the ruined contract. Broadcast it to the entire world. The moment it goes live, my lawyers will hit you with a RICO lawsuit, so massive it will shatter what is left of your pathetic life. You wanted 80% of my company. By the time I am finished with you, I am going to own the very shoes on your feet. The shredded pieces of the 80% equity contract settle directly into the center of Vivian's pristine duck à l'orange. The silence that follows is so absolute I can hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the grand foyer. No one breathes. The sheer audacity of destroying their corporate lifeline in the middle of their own dining room has momentarily short-circuited their ability to respond. Terrence is the first to recover. He refuses to be beaten by the daughter he discarded. He reaches into the breast pocket of his tailored suit jacket and pulls out a single neatly folded document. It is a contingency plan. A streamlined one-page version of the non-disclosure agreement and the equity transfer. He smooths the heavy parchment out over the ruined tablecloth, pushing aside a crystal wine glass. He reaches into his other pocket, produces a heavy gold fountain pen, and places it deliberately on top of the paper. He looks up at me, a dangerous, terrifying calm, replacing his previous shouting. You think your little digital watermarks scare us, Kiara? He asks, his voice smooth and lethally quiet. You think technicalities stop men with my resources? I have federal judges who play golf at my country club. I have state politicians whose entire re-election campaigns are bankrolled by my holding companies. A watermark is an inconvenience. I can drag your production company through so many layers of appellate litigation and discovery depositions that your legal fees will bankrupt you before a jury ever sees that footage. You are a single woman standing against a dynasty. He points commandingly to a seat near the head of the table. His face is a mask of enforced, absolute authority. Sit, Kiara. Right where you used to. I do not move toward the table. I do not look at the document. Instead, I reach out with my foot and kick the heavy wooden dining chair back. The harsh, violent scrape of the wood against the polished hardwood floor echoes sharply in the cavernous room. I never sat at the dining table, Terence. I say, my voice cutting through the manufactured elegance of the room like a blade. I ate in the kitchen after you, Vivian and Chloe, were finished. I ate the cold scraps off the serving platters while standing over the sink so I would not take up space in your perfect domestic portrait. Do not try to rewrite history just because you need my signature on a check today. Vivian gasps, her hand flying to her throat in a practiced display of maternal shock. That is an absolute lie, she protests, her voice pitched high with righteous indignation. We always set a place for you. You were the one who refused to join us. You isolated yourself because you were determined to punish us for simply loving your sister. I look at the pen resting on the contract. I refuse to touch it. Chloe snaps. The immaculate pregnant socialite facade melts away, completely revealing the ugly, spoiled child she has always been beneath the expensive cosmetics. She leans across the table, her hands planted flat on the mahogany, her eyes venomous and wild. You always were an ungrateful brat, Chloe sneers, her voice vibrating with entitlement. We are offering you a real family. We are giving you a chance to finally belong somewhere instead of being a miserable, lonely outcast, pushing papers at a second-rate network. We are giving you the privilege of protecting the Prescott legacy. This is your last chance. I look at her, analyzing the pure delusion in her eyes. A real family, Chloe. Is that what we are calling it now? I ask, my tone conversational, but laced with venom. I remember exactly what belonging to this family looked like. I remember the Thanksgiving when I was 8 years old. You blamed me for breaking Vivian's imported crystal vase because you wanted to see if they would actually throw me outside in the freezing rain as punishment. They did. I sat on the frozen concrete patio for 6 hours, shivering in a thin sweater, listening to you all laugh and eat turkey through the dining room windows. I watched you perform for the guests while I froze. Chloe flinches, her eyes darting away for a fraction of a second. You broke that vase, she mutters defensively. I was locked in my bedroom reading a book, Chloe. You knocked it over while practicing your ballet routine in the hallway. We both know it, and Terence knew it too, I state plainly. Your version of a real family is just finding a sacrificial lamb to absorb all your sins. And I am done bleeding for your comfort. I push the heavy wooden chair completely out of my way and stand up straight. I have delivered my message. There is nothing left to negotiate. I turn my back on the dining table and begin walking toward the grand foyer. Julian moves with frantic, panicked speed. He realizes his entire financial future is walking out the door. He sprints past the dining table, his elbow clipping a silver candlestick and sending it crashing to the floor. He beats me to the heavy oak double doors leading to the driveway. He grabs the brass handles, shoving his entire body weight against the wood. With a loud, heavy click that reverberates through the foyer like a gunshot, Julian slides the massive brass deadbolt into place. He stands with his back pressed against the door, his chest heaving, his expensive suit wrinkled and disheveled. He points a shaking finger at me. This is private property, he breathes, trying to construct a legal defense in real time. We are well within our rights to detain a distressed individual who is acting erratically and poses a threat to herself and others. I stop in the center of the foyer, the crystal chandelier casting long, sharp shadows across the marble floor. I turn around slowly. Terence has moved from the dining room. His massive frame now completely fills the archway leading to the kitchen, cutting off my only other exit. He rolls his broad shoulders, the fabric of his dark suit stretching tightly over his muscles. He is no longer pretending to be a civilized businessman negotiating a corporate merger. He has reverted to his most basic brutal instinct. He is a warden and he intends to break his prisoner. You aren't leaving this house until you sign it, Kiara, Terence says. His voice is a low, guttural rumble of absolute menace. You owe us your life. We took you out of the gutter. We clothed you. We fed you. You belong to us. And you will walk back into that dining room, pick up that pen, and give us what is ours. The air in the foyer is suffocating. Vivian has retreated to the edge of the hallway, clutching her pearls, watching her husband and son-in-law trap me like a cornered animal. Chloe stands safely behind Terence, a triumphant, cruel smile playing on her lips. They are reverting to their ultimate strategy, physical intimidation, confinement, absolute control. They have trapped me in the exact spot where they used to parade me in front of social workers, forcing me to smile and recite rehearsed lies about how happy I was in their care. They expect me to panic. They expect me to scream, to cry, to finally break down and beg for their mercy. I do not scream. I do not beg. I let a slow, terrifying smile spread across my face. I reach into the deep pocket of my trench coat. Julian flinches violently against the front door, bracing himself as if I am drawing a weapon. I pull out my smartphone. The screen is already glowing, displaying a single active application interface. I maintain unbroken eye contact with my father. His expression falters just a fraction of an inch as his brain registers the complete and total absence of fear in my eyes. He realizes a second too late that I am not the prey. I am the architect of this entire evening. I don't owe you anything, I say, my voice ringing with crystalline clarity in the locked foyer. I hit a single button on the screen, but I did bring a +1. Julian stands with his back pressed against the heavy oak door, his chest heaving with the exertion of trapping me inside the foyer. He opens his mouth to issue another legal threat, but the words die in his throat. A sharp metallic click echoes through the quiet house. The heavy brass deadbolt Julian just slid into place violently disengages on its own. He did not touch it. Julian stumbles forward as the massive front door swings open inward, pushed by a force from the other side. Standing in the threshold, illuminated by the harsh glare of the exterior porch lights, is Alana Jenkins. I had a locksmith fabricate a master key 6 hours ago using a childhood clay impression I smuggled out in my coat pocket 26 years ago. Alana steps into the grand foyer. She is wearing a razor-sharp charcoal suit, her posture impeccable. Her presence is a physical, undeniable force. She is a distinguished, powerful Black woman, my former Child Protective Services caseworker, the woman who eventually fostered me, and currently a senior director at the State Department of Child and Family Services. Vivian stares at the doorway from the edge of the dining room. Her perfectly manicured fingers go completely slack. The expensive crystal wine glass slips from her grasp. It hits the hardwood floor, shattering into 100 glittering shards. The dark red Bordeaux splashes across the polished wood, pooling around her expensive designer heels, exactly like fresh blood. That is her. Vivian gasps all the air, leaving her lungs in a rapid, terrified wheeze. She recognizes the woman she handed me over to decades ago. Alana does not yell. She does not display an ounce of the chaotic, desperate rage that currently fills this house. She walks straight past Julian, who is still staring at the open door in absolute shock. She walks past Terence, whose massive frame has gone entirely rigid, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. Alana approaches the dining table with measured, deliberate steps and calmly places a thick, sealed manila folder directly on top of the shredded extortion contract. "Let us review the facts," Alana says, her voice echoing with the unmistakable clinical authority of a high-ranking state official. She breaks the red seal on the folder and pulls out a stack of yellowed, pristine legal documents. These are the original, unsealed voluntary surrender forms from 1999. They are completely intact, bearing the official state watermark and the notarized signatures of Terence and Vivienne Prescott. I reach into my purse and pull out a small digital audio recorder. I step up to the table, standing shoulder to shoulder with the woman who actually raised me. "You see, Julian," I say, locking my eyes onto his pale, sweating face. "They did not lose me. They were not tragic victims of a broken, corrupt system. And they did not just give me up because they were facing a temporary financial crisis." I press the play button on the digital recorder. The audio is scratchy, digitized directly from a cheap microcassette tape Alana kept hidden in my case file for over 2 decades. The hiss of the old tape fills the silent dining room, followed by a voice that is undeniably, unmistakably Vivian. "We only need one of them," the recorded voice of my mother states with chilling bureaucratic detachment. "Chloe is beautiful, she is pliable. Kiara asks too many questions. She is the difficult one. Her sister has a future. Just take the ugly one so we can focus our finances." The recording clicks off, leaving a ringing, catastrophic silence in its wake. Chloe lets out a piercing, mechanical scream. She covers her ears, stumbling backward away from the dining table, as if the audio recording is a physical attack. "It is fake," she shrieks, her voice cracking into a hysterical pitch. "It is a deep fake. You used artificial intelligence to make that audio. You are trying to frame us." But Julian is not looking at Chloe. He is not listening to her frantic denials. He is staring down at the state-certified surrender forms resting on the table. He reads the dates. He reads the psychological evaluations attached to the surrender, documenting absolutely zero remorse from the parents. The realization hits Julian like a physical blow to the chest. The entire prestigious narrative his wife and his in-laws built their social standing on is a complete, total lie. The tragic backstory he used to secure venture capital for his charity foundation is a fabrication. They are not victims. They are monsters who threw away a 9-year-old child purely to save money and preserve an aesthetic. Terrence lunges forward, his face purple, his hands reaching for the state documents. "I am going to destroy you for bringing this filth into my house," he roars. I do not flinch. I look up at the ceiling corner, pointing my finger directly at the high-end, discreet security camera Terrence installed to monitor the dining room and protect his precious wealth. "By the way, Terrence," I say, projecting my voice so it carries perfectly across the room, "I hacked your local network the moment I walked into the foyer." Terrence freezes, his hands inches from the paperwork. "This entire dinner," I continue, my tone absolutely lethal, "the extortion threats you just made, Julian physically locking the door to illegally detain me, the shredded corporate contract, it is all currently broadcasting live on my network's premium streaming platform." Terrence's head snaps up to the camera. The small blinking red light confirms his absolute destruction. His jaw works, but no sound comes out. The blood drains completely from Vivian's face as she realizes the entire world just heard her call her own daughter ugly and discard her like trash. I pull back my sleeve and check my watch, tapping the glass face. Right now, exactly 3 million viewers are tuned in. I state, watching the absolute terror paralyze the 4 people who thought they could break me, including Julian federal prosecutors. The sheer magnitude of the trap snapping shut finally breaks the paralysis in the room. Complete and utter chaos erupts. The pristine illusion of the Prescott family shatters into a million jagged pieces simultaneously. Julian is the first to move. The survival instinct of a cornered corporate criminal overrides any lingering shred of loyalty he might have possessed. He spins away from the heavy oak door, his hands trembling violently as he fumbles with the brass deadbolt he had slid into place just moments ago. He yanks the lock back with a metallic crack and throws the door open to the cold night air. Chloe rushes forward, her hands grasping at the sleeves of his expensive suit. "Julian, please," she begs, her voice shrill and completely devoid of its usual manufactured sweetness. "You cannot leave me here. We can fix this. We can call your lawyers." Julian violently rips his arm out of her grip. He spins around, his face a mask of pure revulsion. "Fix this," he screams, the sound tearing through the grand foyer. "You and your psychotic family just handed the federal government a live broadcast of extortion and witness intimidation. You did not just ruin my capital raise, Chloe. You dragged me directly into a federal prison." He does not look back. He does not spare a single glance for his pregnant wife or the parents who subsidized his fraudulent lifestyle. He sprints down the front steps toward his luxury sedan. Seconds later, the screech of tires tears through the quiet suburban neighborhood as Julian speeds off into the darkness, abandoning Chloe completely. Chloe stands in the open doorway, her arms wrapped around her stomach, hyperventilating. The reality of her absolute abandonment is written clearly across her face. But Terrence is not finished. The departure of his son-in-law and the collapse of his financial security push him past the point of rational thought. He is a man who has spent his entire life controlling his environment through sheer physical and financial intimidation. The realization that he is entirely powerless drives him into a state of blind, brute rage. He lets out a guttural roar and lunges across the foyer. His massive hands reach out, aiming directly for my phone, intending to smash the device and physically end the broadcast that is actively destroying his life. I do not step back. I do not need to. Alana moves with the fluid, seamless precision of a woman who has spent decades handling violent, desperate people. She steps squarely between me and my father. She does not raise her hands defensively. Instead, she reaches into the breast pocket of her charcoal suit and smoothly extracts a leather wallet, flipping it open to display a gleaming silver state badge. I highly advise against assaulting a media executive and a senior state official on a live federal feed, Terrence, she states, her voice cutting through his rage like a whip. Terrence freezes. His heavy boots skid to a halt on the marble floor barely an arm length away from Alana. His chest heaves, but the sight of the state badge and the unyielding authority in Alana posture act as a physical barrier. He looks past her, staring directly into the lens of my phone camera. The blinking red recording light suddenly looks like the laser sight of a sniper rifle. The violent momentum drains out of his body, leaving behind a hollow, shaking shell of a man. His hands drop to his sides, trembling uncontrollably as the absolute certainty of his ruin finally sets in. Behind us in the dining room, a ragged, desperate sound breaks the silence. Vivian has collapsed. Her legs give out entirely, and she falls to her knees among the shattered crystal and the dark pooling wine. The $200 bow soaks into the fabric of her cream cashmere sweater, ruining it instantly. She is no longer the immaculate country club matriarch. She is a broken, terrified woman staring into the abyss of public disgrace and criminal indictment. She crawls forward slightly, the sharp edges of broken glass biting into her knees, but she does not seem to notice the pain. She reaches her hands out toward me, her face streaked with mascara and genuine desperate tears. Kiara, please, she sobs, her voice cracking. Please stop the stream. I am begging you, turn it off. We can make this right. I am your mother. Please look at me. I am your mother. I look down at the woman kneeling in the spilled wine. I study the lines of panic on her face, the pathetic pleading in her eyes. I search myself for any lingering trace of the 9-year-old girl who used to crave her affection. I find absolutely nothing. The emotional void inside me is perfectly calm. I step around the edge of the pooling wine, looking down at her with a face completely devoid of emotion. Alana is my mother, I say, my voice steady and cold. You were just a temporary incubator who made a bad investment. I do not wait for her response. I turn my back on Vivian kneeling in the ruins of her dining room. I turn my back on Terrence staring blankly at the marble floor. I turn my back on Chloe weeping in the open doorway. I slide my phone into my pocket, ensuring the live broadcast continues running. Alana falls into step beside me, and together we walk out the front door, leaving the house on Maple Drive to burn in the ashes of its own making. 3 months later, the air in my high-rise corner office is perfectly still. The afternoon sun pours through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm golden light across my sleek glass desk. The chaotic, violent night in the suburban dining room feels like it happened a lifetime ago. I stand by the window looking out over the sprawling city skyline. The city below is moving at its usual frantic pace, but up here, everything is quiet. Everything is secure. The live stream was the absolute nail in the coffin. The fallout was swifter and more devastating than even my legal team had projected. When 3 million people, including active federal agents, watch a family coordinate extortion and confess to historic child abandonment, the justice system tends to move with unprecedented speed. Julian Firm collapsed within 48 hours. The federal investigators used the financial breadcrumbs I laid out during the gala to secure immediate warrants. They raided his offices, seizing servers and freezing accounts before he could even attempt to shred the evidence. Facing decades in federal prison, Julian did exactly what a rat does when a ship goes down. He filed for divorce immediately, attempting to legally separate himself from the Prescott family and shield whatever offshore assets he had managed to hide. He left Chloe completely broke. Her designer wardrobe and luxury vehicles were seized by the bank. When she reached out to her elite circle of socialite friends, she found her numbers blocked and her invitations revoked. The high society world she worshipped exiled her overnight, treating her like a contagious disease. Terrence and Vivian met an equally brutal fate. The unredacted financial files I provided to the authorities triggered a massive audit of Prescott Holdings. The bank foreclosed on the pristine house on Maple Drive, giving them exactly 3 days to vacate the premises. Their prestigious country club sent a courier to their temporary rented apartment, formally revoking their memberships, to protect the institution from the stench of their scandal. Both Terrence and Vivienne are currently out on bail, facing multiple state and federal charges, including mortgage fraud and the attempted extortion broadcast live to the world. I turn away from the window. Alana sits across from my desk, resting in a plush leather armchair. She is wearing a soft beige suit, a cup of chamomile tea resting in her hands. She looks relaxed, her eyes shining with quiet, profound pride. She sets her teacup down and slides a glossy folder across the glass desk. The final overnight numbers came in, Alana says, a warm smile breaking across her face. I walk over to the desk and open the folder. The ratings report for the finale of my investigative docuseries, The Golden Child Shadow, is printed on the first page. The numbers have completely shattered every existing network record. The series became a global phenomenon, sparking massive public discussions about the foster system, corporate fraud, and the dark reality of performative wealth. The board of directors, who had threatened to suspend me 3 months ago, are now sending me daily floral arrangements and offering unprecedented contract extensions. I look at the staggering viewer metrics and allow a genuine smile to reach my eyes. I pull a heavy document from my outbox. It is the final piece of paperwork requiring my signature today. It is a legally binding transfer, authorizing a massive multi-million-dollar donation from the docuseries profits directly to the state foster care system, establishing a permanent educational trust for aged-out youth. I uncap my pen and sign my name with a smooth, decisive flourish. The ink dries instantly on the page. I slide the finalized paperwork toward Alana. She takes it, her hand briefly covering mine in a silent gesture of absolute solidarity. I look back out the window at the skyline stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The scared little girl who used to eat cold scraps over a suburban kitchen sink is gone entirely. I am safe. I am wildly successful. I am sitting in an empire built on my own undeniable truth, surrounded by the family I actually chose. The most powerful lesson from this story is that true strength lies in absolute self-reliance and the refusal to be defined by those who belittle you. Kiara's journey demonstrates that toxic family dynamics and manipulative extortion lose their power the moment you stop seeking their validation. By quietly building her own empire and securing unassailable leverage, she transformed her status from a helpless victim into an untouchable force. Blood does not guarantee loyalty, and genuine love should never be transactional. Ultimately, your greatest defense against exploitation is your own independence, meticulous preparation, and the unyielding courage to stand your ground. Share your story of overcoming toxic relationships and building your independence in the comments below.